What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a very special episode of the Data Driven Strength Podcast. Today, we're going to be discussing our newest release, which is Infinity Programs. This will be a bit of a sales pitch, but I think we'll discuss this in a way that is very helpful to people, even if you're not interested in Infinity Programs. We'll talk about what exactly that is, some of the logistics about it in a second. Also, what it is not, we'll discuss that as well. But, we'll be the first to say it's not for everyone. And even if it's not for you, you're not particularly interested. Hopefully this episode is still, useful and you can pick up something. Because I think when we discuss what went into creating Infinity over the last almost 2 years now, it's an interesting thought experiment in the sense of we're typically talking about direct research on this show, but this is when the rubber hits the road, right? There's no citation after your squat protocol if you sign up for Infinity. So hopefully it's helpful on that front. But yeah, I'm excited. Zach, do you have any initial thoughts here, man?
Not really. It's just like, it's crazy kind of getting to this episode after, like you said, it's been a very, very long time since we kind of had the initial, chats and stuff about this. And I'm very excited to kind of talk through some of our thinking on this and talk about all the things that, hopefully lifters will be excited about once they get their hands on this.
The number of times I had doubts like, man, we're not going to make it happen. But to be like, no, we I was texting my brother about this. My brother's an engineer, so we kind of like to discuss like different problems that we're having from a technical perspective. And I just told him a couple weeks ago, he's like, hey man, you think everything's going to go smoothly getting this to launch? And I was like, I don't know, man. All I can tell you is there's been a lot of obstacles. And I can also tell you that we've overcome every single one because there are a lot of things that go into this. But anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Let's talk about what Infinity Programs is and kind of how we got here. Right. It's late April 2023. We originally introduced our first kind of system in this area May of 2021 or March of 2021, something like that. So a couple years ago, we released DDSIP, Data Driven Strength Individualized Programming. We're happy to be retiring its name because it doesn't really roll off the tongue as you might have just been able to tell. And then I think September of that same year, we released version 2.0 of that system. Version 2.0 dwarfed version 1.0. We essentially went from a system that utilizes like 600 or 700, somewhere around there, training cycles to a system that used, what exactly was the number, Zach? It was in the hundreds of thousands.
Right around 500,000.
Okay, sweet. Yeah. And now we're introducing Infinity, which is the evolution of individualized programming, which is the next step. So I don't even know of a good analogy here. If 2.0 dwarfed 1.0, what did Infinity do to version 2.0?
I don't know, man. Ate it for breakfast.
Ate it for breakfast.
Ate it for breakfast. Yeah.
This is a massive jump forward, and I think that's reflected in terms of the timetable of the releases, right? A handful of months to go from 1.0 to 2.0, and now almost 2 years to go from 2.0 to Infinity. And let's take a step back. If you don't even know what individualized programming is, which is totally fine, it is a programming system that is cheaper than one-on-one coaching, but it is designed to give you everything you need to maximize your progress. Do you have anything to add in terms of the general history, Zach, of getting to this point, and just the high-level understanding of what Infinity Programs is?
Yeah, I guess for a little bit of context, maybe on kind of what we were trying to solve when we kind of got into all this. People had asked us for a while, we like to nerd out on the programming stuff, particularly for strength. We didn't really sell programming, like programs or anything. And we kind of struggled with this like internal decision about like, to some degree, our brand is like centered around individualization, right? And coming up with something that's a template or something like that is pretty unidimensional was something we weren't super excited about. And had just kind of kicked that down the road of like, yes, we absolutely want to have a programming option that, like you said, Josh, is just a little bit more, a different cost than one-on-one coaching. And so, we started to get the wheels turning about how can we provide something that actually has some of these individualization thought processes within it. And that's where, the original version of DDSIP came from. But as we put that together, we realized how many compromises we had to make to get that from a functional standpoint to actually get out the door and for some people to be able to use it. And obviously, we still think that was a net positive. And I think a lot of not only, people hit a lot of PRs doing that, and we learned a ton with those first couple iterations. And so I'm almost glad that we went through those before we got to this now, because it would look very, very different if we did not have all the awesome lifters that had used the first couple versions of DDSIP to, like, the strength limiter thing that we've talked about a ton on a lot of the podcasts almost entirely came out of, man, this guy's squat will not budge with kind of our standard approaches, standard tweaking procedures that we would do for a one-on-one client. Why is that? Then we go back and review a lot of the training of our one-on-one clients that we worked with for a very long time, and maybe made some modifications we normally wouldn't make, and we kind of start to see some of these through lines and how those modifications were being made in the back of our brains that we didn't really entirely realize. And I think that process happened multiple times, which has led us to 2.0, where we build in a few more of those decision-making procedures. But then, again, those have limitations as well. And we just continuously kept realizing these limitations and wanted to try to break those barriers as much as possible to get to something that utilized all of these decision-making processes, is still really cost-effective, but can get that in the hands of a lot of people to be able to use those. And like you said, get as close to one-on-one coaching as possible with something that's pretty damn cost effective ultimately. And I think, again, I just want to first and foremost thank all the lifters that gave us a shot with DDSIP. I think it was really tons of good feedback. And more importantly, I think we learned a ton that Infinity would look so much different if we did not have that experience over the last couple of years, seeing all the lifts, all the posts, all the awesome training cycle recaps from lifter. Like, it's just so much information that came from that I think, we're really proud of what this product is going to be able to deliver from a functional standpoint. But I also think just like the story of like all those lifters contributing to that is pretty cool too.
Yeah. I think just a way to kind of sum that up is, given how much success people had on the first two versions, and given how big of a leap forward Infinity is, I'm very excited for what's to come. I mean, there's a lot of people that have been on DDSIP since the date, I'm forgetting again, I think March 2021.
Yeah, it was March.
That have put like obscene numbers on their totals. And my favorite thing, and we've heard it from a good amount of lifters within individualized programming, and this is something that we'll also hear from one-on-one clients, and this is my favorite thing, is like I'm touching numbers I never thought was possible. And we got a lot of people, we didn't get people to that point. They got themselves to that point, but they used the previous systems to get to that point. And they got to that point with a previous system that was a hell of a lot better than, off-the-shelf templates, but was very, very limited. And now to take that system, the base of it in general is still similar, right, conceptually, but just the flexibility, the options you're going to have when you take your individualization quizzes, which we'll get to in a little bit, I'm sure, is just completely dwarfs the previous versions. And that makes me really, really, really excited. And we're just going to continue to collect feedback from here. But this is just such a big jump forward. And I know I've said that multiple times, but I can't emphasize it enough. And I think that's probably a good bridge to discussing like why we're calling it Infinity, and just conceptually what this system will do for you. But even though that's a great bridge, I'm actually going to interrupt myself here. And I want to talk about some logistics. So let's say you are like on board with Infinity. You're like, all right, sign me up. Or if, by the end of this podcast or later on you decide it is something you're interested in, we are releasing it like kind of later in the week, right? And the system will create your program quick, but we are going to be performing initial quality control, just make sure everything's all good before sending things out the door. So that essentially makes it so you're all good to go to train by Monday after launch day, right? The initial sale will probably go for about a week. So if you want to start the Monday after that, you can also kind of give yourself a week as well. Maybe sign up near the end of the sale, that sort of thing. I'll also say that if you want to take advantage of the sale and maybe you're finishing up your current training block or whatever, that's totally fine too. You can start whenever you want. Sometimes we're not super clear about that. People think like there's a specific date they have to sign up or start by. You can start whenever you want. Once you're in, you have access to the system and you have access to resources to utilize that system to make it work the best for you. And you also have access to ourselves and the other lifters to help you make the best use of the system as well. Again, I just wanted to mention those logistics because just want to make sure we're on the same page. Like, hey, might take a little bit to get out the door, but you can train as soon as the Monday after launch day, or push it back basically as long as you want. But Zach, unless you have anything to add, let's move into Y Infinity, and I'll let you kick that off.
Cool. Yeah. So we were discussing kind of transitioning to this newest version that we've now called Infinity. And, we've already said it before, but we quickly realized as we were kind of, talking about the substantial amount of changes that have went into kind of what we were thinking, new direction, those kind of things, and kind of trying to symbolize those new beginnings, we quickly realized DDSIP probably isn't the snappiest thing to, get people's attention and get people excited. So we ultimately ended up, coming up with the name Infinity. And I think it has a ton of like symbolism to it, which I'm a big fan of. And I think there's kind of multiple things that kind of go into what that means. So the first obvious component of kind of the infinity symbol is kind of the concept of never ending, right? And so, with typical, like template based approaches, things like that, even our own, the previous versions of DDSIP, that is, those probably aren't designed to keep you, moving your training in the direction it needs to go forever. The only real way that can happen is if the adjustments are able to be made on a very, very granular scale and able to be gone to pretty far polar extremes if necessary. Now, of course, by definition, the most people are kind of going to fall in the average, range of training variables and stuff like that I would say most kind of programming is going to account for. But ultimately, the whole point of us creating this in the way that it did is we want to serve the people that need individualized training, and in some cases radically individualized training, and be able to account for that ongoing in a never-ending system. And that's really what kind of the first aspect of Infinity means is if you use this system the way that it's intended, it should be able to serve you essentially forever. The variables will adapt to your training outcomes, your subjective input, all kinds of stuff, and can essentially be neatly navigated in either direction in a very granular way, which allows you to continuously take in the information that you're seeing as you're training. And also, if things change drastically, whether that's your goals or whether just the way that training needs to be formulated to allow you to push forward, there's always new ground for you to be able to cover based on the tons of different combinations of the variables that we can try to get things moving in the right direction. So with that in mind, it basically allows for a never-ending system that adapts to what you need to make sure that your training's moving in the right direction. Do you want to keep rolling here, Josh? Do you have anything to hit on that one?
Yeah, just a quick piece of context. Like as long as your goals fall within like powerlifting and or hypertrophy, so like the different paths we have, and this has not changed from the previous system, is strength and size, which is probably the most common one, powerlifting, and muscle growth, right? So if you're all powerlifting, you don't care about physique, we have a route. Or I shouldn't say don't care, but you don't care to prioritize it, right? You just want to do a little bit of curls each week to make sure, your low bar positioning feels good, for example. Strength and size, again, everything's there to kind of round out things from a physique development perspective, in addition to the squat, bench, deadlift training. And then there's also muscle growth, which is let's put top end strength out the window. We're just focused on getting as big as possible. And another kind of cool thing, just as an example, I'm not saying anyone should train like this. And I'm not saying anyone will even end up with this on the system. But you could, with Infinity, you could end up with a training program where you bench 5 times a week, you squat once a week, you deadlift once a week, which is kind of atypical, but not that crazy. Maybe you're like kind of a bench specialist, if you will. You do bench only competitions, but you still care about squat and deadlift a little bit. Further, you could end up with having one set per session in the bench press protocols and a lot of per session volume in the squat and deadlift days, right? That's a really weird training week to have low frequency but high per session volume for squat and deadlift, but very high frequency for bench press and very low per session volume for bench press. Again, I've never programmed anything like that, but this system is designed to get someone there over time, like you said, in that never-ending system. And the possibilities are just so endless. Like, I know people are going to come up with things we didn't even think of, which is really exciting. Now, that's all within the constraints of reasonable caps we've kind of put on the system, if that makes sense. Like, you're not going to end up with 10 bench sessions per week. You're not going to end up with 5 squat sessions per week, because we just know that's not realistic, and that's probably not going to be good for nearly anyone. There are constraints to some degree, but within those constraints, the possibilities are just so wide. And these are things we weren't even close to with 2.0, with individualized programming. There were caps to it, right? So if you were on kind of the highest volume bench approach and it didn't go great, we didn't really have much to troubleshoot. There were some things we were able to do and that we did find success with at times to kind of point people in that direction. But this system just kicks it up a notch. And I completely threw you off, Zach, from your explanation of Infinity, but I don't know, man. I'm just juiced up about the possibilities with this.
Yeah, no, for sure, and I agree. We got some other our favorite features and limitations coming up here at the end, so I'll save more dialogue on that. But yes, I completely agree. Coming back to kind of why Infinity, the kind of the next kind of pillar of what it symbolizes is the infinity symbol, specifically the one that you may have seen on Instagram. Typically, an infinity symbol is more kind of rounded off. And it's essentially 2 circles, or like a sideways 8 is kind of a typical infinity symbol. Ours is a little bit more angular, and specifically it's 2 triangles kind of connected, making that infinity symbol a similar pattern. But the reason we went with that is, you may have heard, like in physics or chemistry, the kind of triangle symbol means delta, or change over time. And so that, again, is just symbolizing kind of what we were seeking to do with this. There's tons of things that change over time. The training variables, the microcycle structure that you may want to roll with, your training goal, different other features of the progression systems, the protocol types. There's all kinds of things that you can choose that aren't static features as they were in past versions, where Josh and I basically took our most common approaches for one-on-one coaching. But anyone that's coached a good handful of people know that basically every single thing that I just mentioned is a tool in your tool belt, and nothing that you can always plaster on the wall is something that's going to be effective in 100% of cases. So we've made it so that not only can different individuals come to different solutions for a given problem, but that can be adapting constantly while you're using this product. If one protocol type works with this set of variables, we can easily adapt that in future cycles if things change, and vice versa. So I think that there's another just massive pillar, is that this isn't meant to be a static product. And I think that's one of its biggest advantages, is that as you learn more information about what works for you as an individual, we can allow that to change and those targets to change over time. And I think maybe a specific example there is coming back to the strength limiter stuff. That's a big thing. Kind of in the past versions of UDSIP, we were making suggestions to lifters on kind of how to manually change exercise selection. But this time we've kind of built that into the system to basically give you like a slight nudge in the right direction based on the strength limiter that you perceive for what we think will be most effective in developing the lift that you're trying to develop. So that part's also really cool. I don't know if you want to chime in there or do you want me to hit the last one?
No, yeah, I said no and then was about to go talk, which people do all the time, and I'm definitely guilty of it, which makes no sense. Yes, I do have a quick thing to add. I think something I'm excited for is with previous versions, a handful of people, like, but a relatively small percentage of people subscribed to individualized programming got a lot of the things that everyone will now get. In other words, we've had this community aspect to the product, and we're going to continue to have this kind of community and resources to make sure you're using the system as best you can. Um, in previous versions, we've kind of directed people towards, hey, I think this is your strength limiter. I think you should select this exercise or one of these handful of exercises in one of these days. And that was from a long list of exercises, for example, for say like squat muscle growth, squat hypertrophy work. But if they aren't the type of person to comment in a Facebook group and share that sort of thing, they're not necessarily getting that. Whereas now it's all built in, right? And just spending time in the Facebook group over the last handful of months, the things that we're saying are now built into the system. And our job is now going to be to help each person make best use of the system through the resources that are in there or through question and answer that people might have, which makes me really excited because we're really empowering the user, which or the lifter or the customer, because it's all there for them, right? And they don't necessarily need to rely on posting in a group maybe if they're not comfortable with it, which really makes me excited. And I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but part of a new feature coming with Infinity is access to a community with resources. And as of recording this, I'm still putting the final touches on that. But something I noticed is like there's going to be a good amount of resources in there. We have like a ton of webinar archives that are going to go in there that you can check out, which is like honestly could be sold for a lot of money in and of itself. We have like, I don't know, a couple dozen like essentially in-house meta-analyses within those things. But the point I'm making is a lot of those things are just built into the individualization quiz now. And there's going to be a lot of resources in there, but like it's just so much more streamlined now, which makes me really excited. And it's going to be a lot easier to take advantage of all these things. So that's my 2 cents on kind of this systematic approach that again now is going to be so much easier for every customer to have.
Yeah, and I think the last aspect is, it's pretty self evident, but I think it's important to really drive it home. Ultimately, the kind of the last component of the logo and the vision of the product is just accommodating the individual at every step of the way. So within the kind of infinity symbol, like I said, that's your typical figure eight, but ours is a bit more angular with the two triangles. Within that actual triangle, there's what resemble base pairs of DNA that are basically symbolizing to some degree that this product is dedicated on the individual basis that are going to differ from one another in some cases greatly. And I think to really understand that, I think it just comes down to how much an individual centric approach was, the absolute ground roots of this product. Pretty much every single thing that you can do in this has the ability to, start with what we think is the kind of the best practice for most people. But there are solutions that Josh and I may have reached in a coaching situation one time over the time that we've been coaching for the multiple years. But ultimately that is there because we know some individual out there may need that in order to progress training. And that basically goes for everything. The volumes, in the last iterations of the products, we had a good amount and a good range of volumes, but we didn't have the entire span of what we have seen be effective in our coaching practice. Now we have access to that. Literally anything, we can do it. Frequencies, similar thing. We were kind of, had to make some decisions based on practical implementation on the frequencies that we've used in practice and be successful. Josh already mentioned it. You can literally bench twice all the way to 5 times a week in every single different combination of squat and deadlift frequency within that. That will cover literally every single scenario that I've ever had in coaching for a powerlifter. That wasn't true in past iterations. And it's really like that for variables that you may not even consider on little things that can add up over time and really could be that last little lever of individualization that's needed for somebody to be able to tolerate training when they seem to be constantly have aches and pains that don't let them get over that last little hump to be able to tolerate things and progress. Like I could ramble on here for another 10 minutes on all the things that we've from the ground up thought about. Okay, what are the absolute polar extremes in which somebody could use this, and how can we distill this in a way that makes it make sense on the individual level to lead you to those conclusions without it being overwhelming? And I think we've done a really good job in kind of encapsulating that. And it just pumps me up because I know there's going to be training approaches that in previous iterations we would have never even thought on putting on paper. That's going to be exactly what somebody needs to progress. And knowing that we can give that to somebody over time, through properly using the system really juices me up. And I think that's kind of the whole mission of this thing, is to be able to, give that roadmap to somebody in order to slowly make those decisions and utilize the individualization quiz and the resources available to get to those potentially counterintuitive situations that may be exactly what, Bob Smith needs to push things forward.
Dude, shout out to Bob. If there's a Bob Smith reading this, shoot us a message and we will give you a free
For free.
subscription.
Yeah, let's
Yeah,
go.
we'll give you a free
Bob
subscription.
Smith.
You have to send your driver's license though. Um, a little bit of a peek behind the curtain here, but I think it's pretty telling here is that so we probably should have gone over this earlier on, but the way it'll work is when you sign up, you'll get access to an individualization quiz. Same process as the previous versions, but this individualization quiz is much more robust. And the peek behind the curtain is that that quiz could be way more robust than it already is. And we had to say, what things do we need to cut out from this individualization quiz so that people aren't sitting there for an hour answering questions and then they just start clicking through it or something and then the system doesn't even work as intended? What are the most important things? So like, for example, there are some things on the post cycle quizzes. So after you receive a training program, you run that program for as long as you wish, and then you submit the quiz again, letting the system know how things went. You're going to get a new one. There are questions on that post-program quiz that are different from the pre-program quiz because there are certain things we need to program up front that, prioritize up front that, like, if we were to take everything from both quizzes and put them together, it'd just be too much. And the thing that excites me is that we have the flexibility to change that over time based on feedback. So Zach and I, like, over the last couple of days, like, we've come up with things where, like, man, it would be cool to include this. And like, we could include it. We it's not hard for us to include it, but we're just like, it's tough because, like, we also have this variable that is being individualized and there's some interplay there. And also that'll just make the quiz longer. Like, do we actually want to do that? But these are all things that we can change over time. And we just, before we were limited by like our engine, our back end system. Now the system doesn't limit us. Instead, what limits us more is just being realistic with logistics and what we're asking people to to basically answer.
Yeah, I don't want to cut you off, but it's such a good follow up. I'm just going to say it now. This was going to be my answer for the favorite feature, and it gets me juiced up. I get tingles when I talk about this because I just think it's so cool. Just for a little bit of a feedback into how these things work, and like we said, we've had 2 iterations of something like this, so we have a good amount of experience. When you make, a programming system, templates, etc., the the thing that's kind of hidden, and I think people don't realize, is as coaches, we all have biases. We all have biases. We all make assumptions. We have these things that, you may or may not be aware that limit the the directions that you can go in terms of the programming solutions that you can arrive to. That's totally natural and it's not wrong. It's just that's the way that our brains work, right? When you make something like this, it becomes very apparent what those biases are because you have to make a numeric decision on what on to include those in a system. Just as a very basic example, in DDSIP, we never had a set above a 9 RPE. Now, is there ever a time to program that? Absolutely. But the reason we did
Except for
that,
testing sessions.
of course, yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah.
But the reason we did that was more so on the implementation side of the individual. We can't be there. We can't help them manage fatigue depending on the exercise on, all that kind of stuff. Whereas with you're working with a client one-on-one, you get a little bit more hands-on feedback. You can do those things more regularly, etc. That's just a very basic example. Now, the thing that gets me really fired up about this, and Josh already hit it on it a little bit, but I want to make it a little bit more explicit, is that we've went out of our way to pretty much any single one of those assumptions can be changed. And I think that is something that I probably doesn't get enough like appreciation in like general and like system building, is that every system has assumptions that are needed within it in order to reach the ultimate output of a protocol or programming or the ultimate program or whatever. But if Josh and I would have made this 2 years ago, which I already hinted in kind of the intro, the assumptions that we would have made in comparison to now, with the thinking being that we're better coaches, have a better understanding of training now with a couple more years of experience, would be very different. And that's going to be the case in 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line as well. And having the flexibility of changing those assumptions based on the feedback of the community and the lifters and all of the consequences that has on the system as a whole, I think is absolutely awesome, because that makes it so it's not something that we find blind spots and can do nothing about. We can literally adapt the overarching thought process and thinking on some of the behind the scenes stuff to adapt to what the community is telling us to make sure that the lifters are best served. So that seems like a minor thing, but from the nerdy back end side of things, that really gets me excited. And ultimately, I think that gives the product additional longevity and can just be better because we'll be able to take feedback and adapt things over time.
Yeah. I want to give the listener that is going to sign up for Infinity a bit of homework. And that is, if you sign up for Infinity and there's something you want to do or you wish it did, and it's not apparently clear to you, ask us in the group. Because there's probably a good chance we can do it. And now that we're talking through this, right? And obviously I've had these thoughts before, but I think it's really becoming apparent because as of recording this, like it's going to be in people's hands soon, is like our job needs to be helping people make the best use of the system for their situation. So like, for example, if essentially the way the system works is it takes your most recent program and builds off of it based on your post-program quiz. However, let's say you want to take some out of left field approach, which isn't good or bad. If you want to take that approach, awesome. And you want to completely deprioritize deadlift and really push squat. So maybe you're doing a frequency of 2 times squat, 2 times deadlift beforehand, and it was going great, but you're just like, man, I for whatever reason, I just want to prioritize squat right now. It might be best in that situation to take the path on the quiz to say you kind of want to start from scratch, for example. Like there are abilities to kind of build off of what you've done or not build off of what you've done and still kind of lead to the best point for you. And this is what one-on-one coaching does, is it takes those things into account with the human brain. Now it's about using the system based on your specific situation and kind of what you're looking for and what you think you need. And again, I explain that because I think it gives insights into the strengths of the system, but also the limitations of an implementation like this, and ensuring you that while this is not coaching, right? We have a separate offering that is coaching. You do have access to a group that can help you make sure you're using everything properly or to the best of the system's ability, which we think is really really uh, inclusive of a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, money.
Cool. Cool. You want to move into like our favorite features of
Yeah,
the
honestly,
product?
I already said mine, so I'm gonna pitch it to you, and you
Okay.
can go ahead and ramble. I might give honorable mention, but yeah,
Yeah.
mine. Just to summarize again, I think this is a probably a less forward-facing answer, but the everything that determines the ultimate output is adaptable depending on us getting feedback from the community, which impacts pretty much everything. So that is my answer. Somewhat of a cop out, but I'll give an honorable mention after you're done.
Yeah. I'll start with my honorable mention, and that is just the new community platform. As opposed to using Facebook before, we're moving to a new platform. It's just a lot cleaner, a lot easier to use compared to Facebook. And also, like some people just don't like using Facebook, including myself. I really only have that account for my Facebook account for that group that we're going to kind of be retiring. And again, like there's a lot of good webinar archives in there that we've recorded over the last couple years. Again, our focus is going to be towards building out the resources to help people make the best use of the system, kind of fill in the gaps for what this doesn't directly provide. Like, hey, what do I do, if, I'm on vacation and things kind of come up and the block kind of flops, right? What do I do in that case? Do I start the block over? Do I submit a new quiz? Right? Those are the things that with a one-on-one coaching setting like are accounted for, but in a system like this, it's less clear. And we want to build those resources so you're accounted for. So that's my honorable mention is the community and the resources platform. Um, I would say my favorite feature is just the new periodization that we have. And when I say periodization, I'm kind of using that term very generally, and I'm kind of including the general programming structure as well. So there's two things I want to highlight. Actually, three things. The first is the block types that you will have access to. So the block types are, instead of just in our previous system, each cycle was like almost all of them were 12 weeks long, and you had a hypertrophy phase and a strength phase, right? Now we have these different blocks that you can essentially select from, and that influences kind of is the rep more uh, is the training cycle you're running, is it a little bit more like work capacity or hypertrophy biased, or is it a little bit more strength focused, or maybe you need to time things up for a meet? Again, you're going to have these different blocks sequences that you can run through, and that can make it so that a training cycle ends up being like on the longer side, like 20 something weeks, or it can be a really short training cycle, like 8 weeks. And again, those are things we've found ourselves doing in one-on-one coaching practices of really having these long cycles or having these really short cycles. Now we have that flexibility within Infinity. The second thing is the week types that we have. So there's more than this, but I'll just highlight intro weeks, climb weeks, attack weeks, and recover weeks. I think this is really, really cool because every block starts with an intro week, which is a lower stress week, a little bit lower volume, a little bit lower RPE. Every block will have at least 2 climb weeks, which are kind of your normal training weeks, right? And every block will have an attack week. So every block is at least 4 weeks. However, you can extend that climb phase up to 3 weeks, making it a 5-week block. And you can also do a reactive deload and have a recover week, turning it into up to a 6-week block, right? So there's a couple benefits here. The first is that some people just feel that, hey, after 4 weeks, when I go to that 5th week of a block, things just don't feel as good. Cool, stick with the lower end of that. Or you can time up those attack weeks based on your life demands. And this is something I find myself doing with one-on-one clients all the time. If I know, I have a client that's in residency working night shifts in a certain week, I'm not going to time up their attack week with that week, right? So you can kind of drag your feet in a block, maybe extend that climb phase, and then time up the attack week with a week that is more conducive to really getting after it in the gym and having those recovery resources. And it's also just fun to experiment with kind of different flows of a block. So those are the three things I'm really excited about: those block types, those week types, and the dynamic block length that you'll have access to.
I am going to take a logistical uh, stance on this. My phone is about to die, which is using as my camera, so we're going to move on to limitations.
All right, fair enough. You want to kick that off?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. Obviously, on the whole, I think the product, obviously, we're trying to encompass as many lifters as possible in terms of you know obviously one-on-one coaching. The thing we always like to say is that's at the highest tier of the kind of I guess it's the coaching tier list there. I guess is one-on-one coaching is going to be the highest, obviously, because it literally is one-on-one coaching. What we're trying to do with this is get as close to that as possible. Obviously, it's never going to meet the entire demands of working one-on-one individually to manage literally everything in your life, working around holidays, working around personal events that happen throughout the week that could never really be accounted for a priori. That being said, we're going to get as damn close as we possibly can, and that's what our goal is for this. In terms of limitations and I would say kind of maybe who this isn't for is I would say for somebody who maybe hasn't gone through the very basics of training and can kind of understand some of the terminology potentially, maybe understanding basic technical competency of the lifts, things like that. I would say kind of an absolute rank novice who's just getting into the gym, I would probably be more in favor of somebody with a little bit more personal attention in that case. Whereas this is predominantly for somebody who's looking for that programming system to help them navigate their way through their kind of lifting journey, I would say. Um, so that would be the first thing that comes to mind for me, Josh, is somebody that just the population of lifter that just needs a little bit more of that one-on-one attention in terms of technique advice, things like that, and just kind of learning their way around the gym. I would say is probably going to be better served by something that's a little bit more personalized, whether that be a coach in person, whether that be a coach online. That's the first thing that comes to mind for me. What else you got?
Yeah, like if you're looking for to pay for a service that is really on the technique side of things, this is not a technique service, right? This is a programming service. So totally agree with you there. Also, like if you kind of really like someone verifying your RPs, right? A coach is probably going to be better for you. Um, you know, Another thing to mention that I think is a limitation here is that the program will be delivered to you, and this kind of goes back to making sure we provide the lifters the resources to make best use of the system. So if your training cycle that you've received isn't going so hot, right? Maybe the system doesn't hit the mark. That's okay, right? And that's what the system is for, is to improve upon that over time. Um, that's a downside, right? That you could receive a program that isn't worth completing because it just isn't going very well. Now, there you have to balance that with, like, sometimes you need to go through kind of, tough higher rep blocks that don't lead to the best performances to get to your best performances. There's a fine line there, but maybe, I'm just having a hard time tolerating 4 times per week benching and I need to bump it down. In order to do that, you're going to have to take the quiz again, which is great because you weren't able to do that as easily with the old service. But with Infinity, you're going to be able to, you're going to be able to do that a lot easier. But it's not quite as crisp as a one-on-one coach, if you will. That's one thing I'll mention. Another thing I'll mention is there are some constraints due to the logistical reasons. This is something we might be able to improve in the future in terms of training microcycles. So there are a ton of possibilities. Like we said, you could do 5 times per week bench, 1 time per week squat, 2 times per week deadlift, which is kind of a weird setup, but you can end up there. And you can select to have your primary slots biased towards the early in the week versus late in the week. Again, there's a lot of flexibility there. There's like 400 plus microcycles you could end up with. But like you can't get to some weird thing or not weird, but something that's way less common, such as training biceps 5 times per week first in your session. You can't end up there because there are constraints in terms of the microcycles that the the individualization fits within. Another thing I'll say is we have we have done a lot to maximize the experience of the mobile experience of using a spreadsheet, because the programming is delivered through Google Sheets. It's not going to be as crisp as using a native Apple or Android app. We have I have screenshots from like 18 months ago of different iterations to make it as mobile friendly as possible. We have toggles so you can kind of hide your logging area of the spreadsheet and reveal it. Again, we've done everything we can to make the spreadsheet as mobile friendly as possible so you can log easily while in the gym, but it is still a spreadsheet. And that's worth noting, and that's a limitation at this current moment. So those are the main things I have. Unless you have anything else to add, Zach, I think we're good to wrap it up there.
Oh man, this is a long time in the making. Could not be more excited for people to get their hands on it, and hopefully you can hear, our excitement through the mics here, and hopefully that can give you some confidence that, I'm genuinely excited for this. I think Josh and I have both mentioned if this is any sign of quality that we're excited to use this for our own training, kind of moving forward, if that's any indication of kind of our belief in it. So yeah, man, I'm stoked to get it out there, and excited to see what everybody has to say in terms of feedback.
Yeah. Big step forward, but only going to keep moving forward from here. So check out the link in the show notes or the description wherever you're watching this. Check out the landing page, and also, hey, shout out to our the Data Driven Strength creative director Velu for making that wonderful logo that Zach drew up on a napkin, and he turned it into an actually good looking logo. He also did a great job with the landing page, taking our vision and making it. So shout out to Velu. He's been instrumental. Shout out to Drake too, man. Like, this guy has like the new training analysis dashboard. That's Drake getting his getting after it and making something really good. I didn't know what verb to use there. So shout out to those guys, man. Like, Drake's been integral from the initial vision of this. So shout out to him. Shout out to Velu.
He's a rank 3 spreadsheet wizard now. He's continuously upgraded, so he's the man.
Yeah. So check it out. We hope you enjoy. We're looking forward to your feedback, and we'll be back to more nerdy topics in coming episodes.
Take care, guys.